lunch as we meet again to explain more about the four horns of Zechariah chapter 1. As we promised when we met last time on the new moon, that we want to find out what is happening to us. What is God doing to us until the time He comes? And under the topic, who are God's people for this time? Who are they? So we want to find out as we read from last time when we read, we found out that in verse 16, let's just reiterate in verse 16, Zachariah.
Verse 16.
Yeah.
Therefore, thus saith the Lord,
Right.
I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies.
Right.
My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem.
So God confirmed He has now returned to Jerusalem. It was in 1844, as we found out from the study on the new moon. The previous study, if you haven't been to that video, just go and scroll it and find out where we read from Zechariah chapter 1 until we are on verse 16. So God said, now I have returned. Whether the wife doesn't want to return, the woman given eagle's wings to fly into the wilderness does not want to return, but God has returned now to call on each and everyone to come back where Christ had established the early Christian church. So God is now back from 1844. Now let's read about the four horns as we promised in verse 18.
Verse 18. Then lifted I up mine eyes,
Right.
and saw, and behold, four horns.
Now, so Zechariah is saying, I now lifted mine eyes and saw four horns. Right? So, but we want to know, what are these? So read on, let's see.
And I said unto the angel that talked with me,
Right?
What be these?
What are these four horns? Now, after God has proclaimed that he's back to Jerusalem, then he says, when he's back to Jerusalem, he's eagerly waiting for the wife. He said, I'm jealousy for Jerusalem. That's what he did. That's why he did not come on 1844 on the earth. The wife wasn't there in Jerusalem. So the wife, we knew that the wife was given eagle's wings in Revelation chapter 12 to fly into the wilderness. And that's why the wife is established until today. But in 1844, Christ says, I'm back to Jerusalem. I'm jealous for it. Why? Because when Christ didn't come, instead God is saying, he's jealous for Jerusalem. And because the wife wasn't back, wife was given only 1,260 days or 60 years, which is the Dark Ages period from 538 to 1798. That was the time the wife was going to be nourished in the wilderness, but now supposed to come back to the vineyard where Christ established the early Christian church, but did not come back. So God says himself, I'm back. So from 1844, God is back to Jerusalem to wait for the wife to come back. Now, how does the wife come back? So we are seeing four horns from verse 18. Now it says, what are these then? So why now is it developed? Why are we being shown the four horns? Let's read on, yeah?
Verse 19. And I said unto the angel that talked with me, What be these? And he answered me, These are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem.
Right. We know how the Israelites, when we say Judah and Israel, we know in the time of Solomon that the 12 tribes was divided into two. The house was rent in twain. So it was the 10 tribes under the name Israel, and then the 2 tribes under the name Judah. So now it says, these were scattered. Now, when were they scattered? We saw Jerusalem being destroyed, and then how were they scattered? We saw the northern part was where Israel was, and then the southern part was where Judah was inheriting. So let's see how they were scattered. Let's read from 1 TG 11.10 day, 11:10.4, right? Say anciently. Let's find out what was happening anciently, right?
Anciently, the kingdom of Israel occupied the northern portion of the promised land.
Right.
And the kingdom of Judah occupied the southern portion of it.
That's what I said below. So, right, what happened then? Uh-huh.
The former was scattered by the kings of Assyria.
That's what happened. Uh-huh.
And the latter by the king of Babylon.
We saw Nebuchadnezzar scattering the... So the former, which is the what? The Israelites. And then the latter, which is the Judah, they were scattered by these two different kings. So we saw Nebuchadnezzar coming to ransack them, and they all went to Babylon, right? And then...
Those who returned to Jerusalem in the days of Zechariah were from the kingdom of Judah,
right,
the Jews.
Right.
But as the kingdom of Israel was assimilated by the nations, it consequently lost its racial and national identity.
Right.
The powers that scattered both Judah and Israel are, you note, symbolized by the four horns.
Right. So these powers that scattered these, both Judah and Israel, the 10 tribes are Israel. The 2 tribes are Judah. So these powers were the four horns. So that's why we are reading on verse 90. These are the four horns which scattered Judah and Israel in Jerusalem. So these are the people who did when they went to 70 years of Babylon, they were scattered by the four horns. You understand? And then let's read on from there.
Verse 20.
Verse 20.
And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters.
Now, so we have seen that the 4 winds, the 4 horns, scattered the Israelites and Judah into Babylonian captivity and Assyrian. So, after the 4 horns, in verse 20 we are seeing 4 carpenters. Now, when you're seeing horns, you're seeing something that will destroy, isn't it? But when you're seeing carpenters, you're seeing something that will build. Now, let's read on. Why is in verse 20 we are getting carpenters then? Right, read from 20 to 21. And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. Yeah.
And the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. Then said I,
right,
what come these to do?
What are these then?
And he spake, saying,
right,
these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head.
Right.
But
so we are seeing the same horns which scattered are the ones that are now carpenters. Did you see that? So if the Gentiles are the ones which scattered Judah and Israel to go for captivity, they are the same ones again to be the carpenters, to bring those back again. Now let's read.
what come these to do? And he spake, saying, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head. But these are come to fray them, to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah and scatter it.
Right? So let's hear the explanation of it from the next 1TG 11. Yeah?
Here,
Yeah.
the same powers which scattered Judah and Israel are against sin, not as horns,
now,
but as carpenters.
The same horns which were 4 now are 4 carpenters. 4 horns turn now to be carpenters. Now, when there were 4 horns, they were scattering. Yeah? They were the ones who destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and scattered Judah and Israel. But now we are seeing them now carpenters. Right, read on.
Here the same powers which scattered Judah and Israel are against sin, not as horns, but as carpenters, not to scatter God's people, but to build for them,
right,
and to cast out the horns of the Gentiles, those who rule the land.
Right.
Plainly then, on one hand,
right,
the nations which do not rule Palestine are to rise as horns
right,
against those who rule it. And on the other hand, they are to rise as carpenters for the people of God.
right.
Thus will the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Now, if you read in Luke chapter 21, verse 24, that's where that verse is. Let's hear it.
Luke chapter 21.
In verse 24.
Verse 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword,
Right.
and shall be led away captive into all nations.
So we saw these ones, the Judah and Israel, they were led into captivity. Now, Luke is telling us that, right? By all nations. That's what have you finished verse 24, right?
And they shall fall by the edge of the sword,
Uh-huh.
and shall be led away captive into all nations.
Right.
And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles,
Right.
until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Until the set times will be fulfilled. So what happened in Jerusalem? It will be trodden by Gentiles. So who is there right now? Gentiles. Do you understand? So why? Because the Israelites and the part of the Judah, they were scattered in the whole nations. This is what Luke chapter 21 verse 24 says. They were scattered all over. And then God said, let the Gentiles tread the holy city. So we know who are they right now. They are Gentiles, right? Because they received the citizenship through naturalizations and everything. This is what the Bible is explaining. They are Gentiles. But where are the real people? They are scattered all over in the whole nation, isn't it? Now here, so when we go in our time, how are they going to be taken back? Let's read from 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17.
Verse 17. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God.
So we will see only those who will survive the judgment. First, it begins in the house of God. And what is it targeting? This judgment is targeting all those children who came from the Israelites and the Jewish nation, which was scattered. So we first see them being caught first in the house of God. That's why we have the sealing process of the 12 tribes of Israel first. And these are the descendants who are now first caught up. No, it's not only appointed to be a Sabbath keeper, but to be both a Sabbath keeper and one of the descendants of these tribes. Do you understand? That's why even in Revelation chapter 7, it says the sealing was on the 12 tribes of Israel. Not on everybody else, but 12,000. And only 144,000 was sealed from the house of God in that time when the judgment starts in the house of God, which we believe is now. Now, not only do they receive the seal, but they are also descendants from these tribes which are scattered. Do you understand? So God, that's why when they hear the commission for keeping the feast, the 144,000 will just know that this is theirs. Why? They are descendants. They are descendants. If you see those people say they are nailed, I will never keep them around. They are not part of this. They are not part of these descendants. They are just because we saw in Revelation chapter 12, when the woman went into the wilderness, what happened? Now let's read that one. I want it to, because when I tell you, you don't think it is in the Bible. Read chapter 12. When the woman went into the wilderness, what happened to her? Right? Start from verse 6.
Verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness.
Right.
Where she had the place.
That's the Christian church which has been established in Jerusalem when Christ went to heaven. So that is now the woman which was being persecuted when the times and laws were being changed in the Dark Ages. So what? They fled to establish their headquarters elsewhere, outside Jerusalem, isn't it? That's what happened, right? So was that place which was outside Jerusalem is termed by the Bible wilderness, right? Fled into the wilderness. So the woman is not there until today. The woman, the church of God, is not there until this day. That's why Christ came in 1844 and said, I'm back now. I'm waiting for the woman to come back. But want to know what happened to the woman when the woman fled into the wilderness. Now read on from verse, I think, 13 there. Where the dragon, yeah.
Verse 13.
Right.
And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth,
right,
he persecuted the woman,
now,
which brought forth the man child.
When the woman fled into the wilderness, we know where the house of God is settled right now, the headquarters. This is what happened to the woman. The dragon saw the woman is no longer in Jerusalem. So where is this woman? Settled somewhere with a headquarters somewhere now, spread into a very big house of God, isn't it? But let's see what happened. It says the devil followed the woman. Now let's hear how the devil did it.
And the dragon saw that the woman, and the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth.
Right.
He persecuted the woman,
right,
which brought forth the man child.
Right.
And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle.
So we are seeing this being repeated. 2 wings after the persecution, right?
That she might fly
into the wilderness,
right? Into her place,
right?
Where she is nourished for a time,
right?
And times,
right?
And half a time.
So he's only nourished for 1,260 years. Where the woman went to settle, it was only the time of Dark Ages. The woman was going to be nourished. After that, the woman is not even receiving any nourishment from God. That's why we see all these things creeping in since 1844. Why? Because the woman didn't go back. If the woman went back, was continuously going to be nourished by these times, by the times which were changed by the beast. They were supposed to be back to the woman when the woman went back to Jerusalem, because the woman left Jerusalem because the times and laws were being changed. Now, if the woman after the persecution went back, we will see this continuation of these times and laws, the festivals, we're still continuing, and the Sabbath still continuing, but the woman stayed on, overlapped like it was in the 70 years in Babylon. They did not go back. The Israelites in the time, they did not go back. They overlapped until Daniel was praying. Now what happens? Now until he was given the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. But now the woman also overlapped. Until today, the woman is still there. That's why it's no longer being nourished. This is what the Bible is saying in the prophecy. The woman was supposed to be nourished for 1,260 years. And that 1,260 is long past. From 1844, God is calling and saying, I'm now back in Jerusalem. I'm waiting for the woman to come back. But that's why eventually we see God now standing with the 144,000 on Mount Zion. Means the woman went back, but who are those women? Who is the woman who went back? It's 144,000 who were sealed. Why were they sealed? They were sealed with 1, God, which are the Sabbaths. 2, New Jerusalem, which are the feasts. And 3, Jesus' new name. As in early writing, page 15, they got that seal. The 144,000, they got it. But the rest didn't get it. It's no surprise. Because you don't see that seal. You don't see that message elsewhere. You see that message in the people who come from the house of God, but you see some who are totally ignorant of the seal. Totally, they just tell you the seal is the Sabbath. That's it. But they do not know that the seals are 3, like it was when they walked out of Egypt. It was 3 seals on the door. The door was struck by the blood 3 times, and now this is the antitype, which is in early writing, the 3 seals. So it's not even surprising to find people from the same house who believe quite different things. Quite different. Because God said it. And they will believe different things. Because those who are sealed and those who are not sealed have a completely different experience altogether. And they all are Sabbath keepers. Why is it so amazing? Because it is fulfilling what the prophecies have said. Because what happened when the woman went to the wilderness? As you read from Revelation chapter 12 there, what happened? The women, you should know exactly this is what happened to the woman. This is a prophecy, and it has been fulfilled. We have seen it. This is why the woman is not back to where the woman was left by Christ in the metropolitan city, which was Jerusalem. Why? There's something that happened. What happened?
And the serpent,
right,
cast out of his mouth,
right,
water as a flood,
right,
after the woman,
right,
that he might cause her to be carried away
now
of the
we
flood.
see a woman, and the serpent, which is the dragon, casting water to the woman. But want to see what is water in Revelation 17 verse 15. What is water in prophecy, which was cast to this woman? So it means the devil has thrown something to the woman.
Verse
right?
17,
Uh-huh.
verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest,
right,
where the war sitteth, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations and tongues.
Never does God describe his people as people, multitudes, nations and tongues. His people, he says 12 tribes of Israel. He just says Israel. But if he says peoples, multitudes, nations and tongues, it's the people who are not part of the descendants of these which were cast out from the Israel and Judah, who were cast. These are people who joined in the descendants of Israel, who are first caught up in the house of God. And what when God is sealing the 144,000, these peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues remain without even knowing what is happening to the 144,000. These are the people that you hear who have nothing to do with the sealing program. We have nothing to do with the new present truth. Nothing. But it says, these were thrown by the dragon from his mouth to the woman. Why? What was the reason why the dragon put this water or these people, multitudes and tongues? What was the reason? Read that verse.
And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. So that he might cause this woman to completely eradicate God's statutes, God's commandments, because the devil was the one who was, working in the dark ages, changing these times and laws. Now he's seen the woman through persecution. It has made even the woman very successful and fled to the wilderness, established outside Jerusalem. And then now the devil said, no, let's change our tactic. Instead of killing the woman or killing all those who are being persecuted, instead let's throw people who think, who appear genuinely Sabbath keepers, and yet they are not. Why? How do you test them? Give them the sealing process. Give them the present truth. Give them that early writing says our seal is God, New Jerusalem, and Jesus' new name. Give them that, and then they'll show who they are. These were coming from the mouth of the dragon. The dragon actually put his own people so that he will carry the woman, cause the woman to be carried away, or cause what the woman is having, or what the church which God had invested with all the statutes and judgment on the early Christian church, caused them all to be taken off. Because listen, one only thing that the devil wanted, you check it from heaven. The only thing he rebelled was the law and the statutes. Nothing else. He's told people that God's law is very hard to follow. This is his argument in heaven. And ever since his argument with God is on the law and the statutes, ever since, check his record, ever since when he came to the early Christian church and raising up the dark ages beast, he was after the very law and the statutes for God, because that's his argument when he was in heaven. And let me tell you one thing, that's why Revelation will tell you that this is the patience of the saints. Those who keep the what? The commandments and the faith of Jesus. This is his argument. The argument is that God's law and God's statutes are very hard. That's why it says you will make the crucifixion of the Lord of Christ. He will work through it. Why? Because he wanted to make everybody believe that even the statutes, even the feasts have been nailed to the cross. That's what his aim was, to make sure that everyone, everywhere. And in some people, they even say even the 10 commandments have been nailed to the cross. But he comes even to the house of God, which is keeping the 10 commandments, and say even the statutes have been nailed to the cross. So that's his argument. Now, when the woman put water into his, the dragon, water into his mouth to cause this woman to be carried away. Or he's actually saying he's causing the woman to stop keeping the commandments and the statutes and the feasts. That's what the water coming from the dragon is all about. Making sure that the woman will. Let's hear what happened next. Revelation 12. Now, if you don't read these prophecies, that's your problem, because the things have been written in symbols so that it's protecting you and me, so that we know what is happening and we simply pack our bags and do what God wants. Right? And verse 16.
Yeah.
And the earth helped the woman. But
instead, God loved his woman. Because this event that he is going to read is future to us. That's what we have been calling all this time, that Ezekiel chapter 9 is a future event, which when the angel will go and find someone with a seal will live, and someone without a seal. This is how the judgment occurs in the judgment begins in the house of God. It starts from the house of God. Where Ezekiel 9, an angel will come like it was in Egypt. Where there was no blood, the firstborn was killed. Where there was blood, there was a Passover. So in our future Passover, the angel will see where there is no 3 seals, that person will lose. And it starts with those who are in front of the temple. Why? The firstborn, first start with them. You understand? Now, this is a future event, but it's there in prophecy. When the woman was given that flood of people who were supposed to stop these feasts being kept, you can hear them. They were nailed to the cross. They were, they speak as if they want to beat someone. But it is because the devil does not want, because he had already thought in dark ages, he had completely changed them, and nobody's going to set them back. But now when they are being set back by the 144,000 or the preaching of the Reformation, he is angry, and his anger goes to the people who came in from his mouth to take this woman, to make sure the woman stops keeping these statutes, because he hated them from heaven. And he continues until the time Christ comes to rescue the 144,000. He hates them. He hates the feasts. He does not want them. He can allow you to keep the 10 commandments, but he knows you're not going to keep them, because he says these statutes were there to guard the 10 commandments. So he knows you will never keep them without the statutes. So that's why he wants to attack. The attack is not on the 10 commandments. Well, were you not so amazed how people want to keep the 10 commandments when they are not keeping the 10 commandments? Why? Because they will attack the feasts which make you keep the 10 commandments. Because it says so. It said the precepts given to guard the Decalogue. It says so. Let's read it. The very feasts that he attacks are the ones that enable you to keep the 10 commandments. So what does he do? He attacks them so that you don't keep the 10 commandments. But that's what we are preaching, that keep the feast so that the 10 commandments will be easy to keep. But he attacks the very feast because he knows once you are left without them, you will not keep the 10 commandments. That's why he's attacking them. That's why the Reformation this time wants you to keep the feast, so that we know already when you keep the feast, these 10 commandments you are going to be able to keep. Let's hear that quotation. What's the purpose of keeping these feasts or these statutes? Yeah.
1 BC 11:04.6.
Right.
Precepts given to guard the Decalogue.
Mm-hmm.
And a consequence of continual transgression, the moral law.
The very topic itself, it says precepts given to guard the Decalogue. Oh, the Decalogue is the 10 commandments. So the precepts which are given are the statutes to guard the 10 commandments. So it means without these precepts or without these 10 feasts, you cannot keep the Decalogue or the 10 commandments. Now let's hear it saying, right?
In consequence of continual transgression, the moral law was repeated in awful grandeur from Sinai.
Right.
Christ gave to Moses religious precepts.
Do you see what was given in Mount Sinai? Religious precepts, right? And what?
Which were to govern everyday life.
These precepts were to make sure every day they govern your life. Right? What are they?
These statutes,
they are the statutes, which are the feasts,
were explicitly given.
They were explicitly given
to guard the 10 commandments.
So that the 10 commandments, you are able to keep them or to guard you from breaking them. Right?
They were not shadowy types.
They are not shadows like people are, those coming from the mouth of the dragon. We said the water coming from the mouth. They tell you that they were nailed to the cross. He said they are not. Sister White says that in 11 BC, in 11.04. He says they were not shadowy types. But do we hear that same sentence? They are not shadows. You hear someone say, these were shadows. They were nailed to the cross. But Sister White said they were not shadows. Did you hear? Repeat. Sometimes maybe it's grammar or something, or maybe the ear has got a blockage or something. They are not shadowy types
to pass away with the death of Christ.
They did not even pass away with the death of Christ.
they were to be binding
Yeah.
upon men
Right.
in every age,
Did you hear that?
as long as time should last.
Did you hear that? So where exactly are we getting that these precepts or these statutes or the feasts were nailed to the cross? When Sister White herself says they were not shadowy types to pass away with the cross. They are binding as long as life should last. And what?
These commands
These commands,
were enforced by the power of the moral law,
these are enforced by the power of the moral law.
and they clearly
Yeah.
and definitely explained that law.
How do you explain the moral law without these feasts? So that's why the Reformation this time is to say, you keep the feast, so that you are able to keep the Ten Commandments.
Amen.
If you are not able to keep the Ten Commandments, it's because you are not keeping the feast. So this is, the devil attacks the feast because he knows once you are left without the feast, you can't even keep the moral law. So this, you cannot claim to keep the moral law without them, because they were guarding the Decalogue. They are not shadowy types. They were given in consequence of continual backsliding. Did you hear? That's what the scripture is saying. So you are telling us that the moral law. So if you argue with someone and then the quotation is explaining clearly these were not shadowy types, then you know you're talking to someone who came from the mouth of the dragon, sent, spewed to the woman to cause the woman to be carried away, like it's Revelation chapter 12. Now, but here, let's go back to Revelation chapter 12. We saw that after the water was splashed to the woman, so that the woman stops keeping this feast, stops keeping this commandment and this feast. What happened? God had pity with the woman. God rescued the woman. How did God rescue the woman? Right.
Verse 16.
16.
And the earth helped the woman.
Right.
And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood,
Right.
which the dragon cast out after the woman.
The earth opened the mouth only to swallow
The flood.
the flood which came from the dragon. What? What is this? We saw that the flood were people. The people, nations, the water is people, nations, multitudes, and tongues, which came from the dragon to the woman, to make sure the woman stops keeping God's law and God's statutes and God's command. Now, instead, God swallowed. But which incident is that? When you talk about Ezekiel chapter 9, that there will be someone who will just slaughter those without the seal. Did you hear that? That's the water. That's the water being swallowed by the earth. Did you hear that? And who did that? It's God who helped the woman and caused the earth to open the mouth, only to swallow the Korahs and the Datans, who were saying the feasts were nailed to the cross. They wanted to cause the woman to be taken away. But instead, that incident will cause anger to the devil. Look at the next verse, verse 17.
Verse 17.
After this incident is occurred, what happened to verse 17? Yeah.
And the dragon
Now the dragon
was wroth with the
this
woman.
was what? The flood which came out of my mouth has been swallowed. When the Korahs and Datans went in the pit, the next day people were angry with Moses. Did you know that? Go to Numbers, you'll find what happened. When Korah and Datan and the 250 princesses were swallowed because they were rebelling against Moses. What happened the next day? So many people were saying, Moses, you caused the people to die. It's Moses who has caused these people to die. And God had to make a plague to crush them all the next day. Do you understand? Now listen to what happened after in future to us, after this slaughter of Ezekiel 9 is occurred. The next day, what happened? Listen, the devil was
wroth with the woman,
right?
and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
What is the testimony of Jesus? It's the prophet. They're not keeping the testimony of Jesus, but they have. That's why Sister White said, the portion on the commandments has been preached. But there's one portion which has not been understood. Is the faith of Jesus. What is it? And then she further elaborates. Bible lets say, if you want, there are so various videos below which have explained about the faith of Jesus, that the faith of Jesus is the prophet. So these people who remained, who were not swallowed by the flood, were called now remnant. You can't call remnant when the church is still commingled wheat and tares together. They are not remnant. Remnant is a remainder. Go to English Bible. What is a remnant? It's something that remains. Now, what did it remain? It remained after this flood was swallowed, which came from the devil, and the woman now was clear with only her followers. And these are the people who now we see with Christ in Mount Zion, with the 144,000. 144,000 now with the woman is now in. This is how the woman went to stand with Christ on Mount Zion. They were now the remnant. These are the remnant who were all with Christ on the day of Pentecost, on the day when they received the latter rain. That's the remnant. Yeah. Don't tell me that they have a remnant now when this incident hasn't occurred. This incident first were those people who came from the mouth of the dragon were swallowed. And then only the woman remained with the 144,000 who were now keeping the commandments and have a prophet. Have the testimony of Jesus, a prophet. And all these who were swallowed were saying, there is no more prophet, there is no more prophet. Sister White was the last one. They were swallowed. Only those who remained with the prophet, who are God's people right now, the remnant. The remnant who stay with Christ on Mount Zion. So we see 144,000. These are the remnant who stayed with Christ on Mount Zion. But what I'm saying, the woman fled into the wilderness and the dragon took water. That's Revelation 12. And splashed it to the woman. But does the Spirit of Prophecy have this incident on 1T? Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 577. Does the Spirit of Prophecy have this incident where the woman now was infested with people who were not Sabbath keepers? We need to know whether that incident was there. Right, read on there. Mm-hmm.
That night.
So Sister White was shown a vision when the woman now is being splashed with people who were not Sabbath keepers. You understand? It's there. That's why the testimonies are there for you and I to believe, to see to come up with the history and see what is happening to us right now. Now that night,
I dreamed that I was in Battle Creek, looking out from the side glass at the door, and saw a company marching up to the house.
This was a dream from the prophet that we believed. She had a dream of what?
A company marching up to the house.
She was seeing a company marching to the house.
2 and 2.
2 and 2.
They looked stern and determined.
They were marching to the house of God. Stern and determined. I said, Revelation 12 says, there were water which came from the dragon, the mouth of the dragon, to the woman. But Sister White is saying, I saw
the company
of because she was leading ministers there. And she saw a company which she knew.
Stern and determined.
Stern and determined. These were people she knew. Listen to that.
I knew them well.
She said she knows them very well.
And turned to open the parlor door.
So she wants to go to open the parlor door.
To receive them.
To receive them, because these are the ministers that she knew.
But thought I would look again.
Let's say, in the dream says, let me look again before I open the parlor door. Let me look again. Right?
The scene was changed.
Then it says, it was in a dream. The scene of the people she knew was changed. What happened?
The company now presented the appearance of a Catholic procession.
So, but he says, no. I'm in a wrong place. These people, they have changed. They are no longer the people I know. Instead, it's something that is coming that is completely different with what I know. Right?
One bore in his hand a cross.
One had a cross.
Another a reed.
Right. Do you see? So everything has changed. Where she knew this should be a Sabbath keeping place. But why is there a bow and a cross. Why? Why do we find crosses all over now dominating our region and dominating our worship, and we find there's a cross? Because we don't have a sign of a cross. There are churches with a sign of a cross. But why now do we all of a sudden have a cross? Now listen.
And as they approached,
Yeah.
the one carrying a reed made a circle around the house.
They went at this headquarter of house where she was, and they made a circle around the house,
saying 3 times.
They said 3 times.
This house is proscribed.
We have taken this house. It's proscribed. And what?
The goods must be confiscated.
And they will take all the goods. They belong now to us.
They have spoken against our holy order.
They are speaking against our statutes and judgments. That's the holy order. Because mind you, when the woman was running away from Jerusalem, it was the times and laws. So now when they are speaking against the times and laws, what are they saying? They are speaking against those that had been changed. You know? Mm-hmm. You know what was changed. So now they said they are speaking against our holy order, so we have taken them. So that year was 1882. If I'm not mistaken on that way you are reading. It's 1882. The house was proscribed, was taken already. And what?
Terror seized me.
And Sister White was so scared.
And I ran through the house.
This is a dream.
Out of the north door.
On 1T, page 577. For Testimonies for the Church, volume 1, page 577. She saw that. And what?
Terror seized me, and I ran through the house, out of the north door, and found myself in the midst of a company, some of whom I knew.
So it's the people she was working with, who she thought they were ours, but they were completely against what we believed. This is what she saw in a dream. And now she was so terrified. Now in Revelation chapter 12 will tell you that the dragon, when he saw the woman in the wilderness, took some water and splashed to the woman to cause the woman to be carried away. You understand now? You really understand that even in the spirit of prophecy, Sister White saw it, that now the people had changed. They had now something else which she wasn't believing. Read for yourself. Testimonies for the Church, volume 1, page 577. Enjoy that and see exactly what happened. This is the reason why God gave us the testimonies, to know where we are going and where we are coming from, so that we are not lost, so that we stay tuned with the heaven. Now, we have seen the remnant was affrighted. The remnant was left without all this flood had been swallowed, and now the remnant was left with the prophet. This was the last thing. When Christ comes, he finds the remnant with the 144,000, which are the remnant with a prophet. They stand on Mount Zion with a prophet. We have done the job to make sure the 144,000 are sealed. You understand? Now let's go back to our chapter. So we see in Zechariah chapter 7, the sealing starts in the house of God. And we saw exactly when we were describing about the sealing, that the sealing was only for the 144,000. And then later on, the remnant is kept and then stood with Christ on Mount Zion, right? Because that way it says, then these guileless servants.
Then these guileless servants of God, the first fruits, are to be sent to the nations that have not heard of God's fame.
After they stand with Christ on Mount Zion, they are being given the latter rain. It's a day of Pentecost. So that's the day they will hear they will be sent now, a commission to go then back to the Gentiles. Now we saw, it's saying the 4 carpenters, that are going to construct. So we want to find out more about what happens with the 4 carpenters, right? The book of Zechariah. Go down below 1 to 11 and 12.3.
The book of Zechariah, in its entirety, has always been a closed book.
Have you read about this book of Zechariah? Anyone watching, have you read about this one? So do you go into the pearly gates without understanding what God put in the book for you to understand and be upright? Now it's being spread. Why? It's the right time. It's the time of Elijah. is the time when we should know about all these prophecies that have been concealed. It's surprising why we want to walk in the cloud without even knowing Isaiah, Zechariah. We only want to hope only, that's it, without even knowing all that. There should be a time to study and get the seal. And by studying, we're studying all truth so that we receive the seal, right? So let's go down again. And previously, the prophet, just jump where he says.
Previously, the prophet saw these as four horns, as powers that scattered Judah and Israel and Jerusalem throughout the Gentile nations.
Right.
But as the angel projected the prophetic view to the time of the end, he saw them as four carpenters.
That's what we have seen.
That is, as horns, they come to fray and to cast out the horns of the Gentiles from the land of Judah.
Right.
But as carpenters, they obviously come to build before Judah. Evidently then, when the horns or powers of the Gentiles are cast out of the land and God's people are brought into it, then the times of the Gentiles shall have been fulfilled.
Now, if it is time for gathering, then it is time for the carpenters. So it means even the time for the Gentiles, which Luke said in chapter 21, the time for the Gentiles is now up. You understand? Now, after having
been shown the symbolism of the four horns and four carpenters, the prophet's attention was turned to another symbolism. We read about it in the first 4 verses of chapter 2.
Right. It's chapter 2 now. Chapter 2, verse 1 to 4.
Verse 1. I lifted up my
Zechariah
eyes.
chapter 2, right? Yeah.
I lifted up.
Prophets, you have to listen carefully. We saw the four horns, they are the ones who scattered. The four carpenters, they are the ones who will be involved in the gathering process of all Gentiles back to the Holy Land. Right?
Verse 1. I lifted up mine eyes again and looked, and behold a man with a measuring line in his hand.
Right.
Then said I, whither goest thou?
Right.
And he said unto me, to measure Jerusalem,
right,
to see what is the breadth thereof and what is the length thereof.
Right.
And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him and said unto him,
right,
Run,
run,
speak to this young man,
right,
saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls,
right,
for the multitude of men and cattle therein.
Do we look upon this time when Jerusalem will be inhabited? Or we are just ready to hop in the cloud? Now, it says, someone had a measuring reed. But what is this measuring reed? It's the sealing process. This is the sealing process that is going to measure who are going to be the Israelites in the house of God. Right? Because there's so many who are not. Why? They came from the flood of the dragon. We saw it in Revelation 12. Now, the measuring reed is to say, why are they being measured? Because Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns. This is what is there in verse 4. It will be inhabited as towns without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. Why are we being sealed? So that we go and inherit the kingdom of God. Where? In Jerusalem. This is why we are being sealed. Some people are saying they are sealed to walk in the cloud. You can't be sealed to walk in the cloud. You are sealed so that so that Jerusalem will be inhabited as towns without walls. For the multitude of men and cattle therein. Who is going to be the wall there? Christ himself will be the wall. Nobody will come near. Now, let's hear furthermore to the explanation on 1 TG 12.16.
From the fact that the angel suddenly ordered the young man
right,
not to measure Jerusalem,
right,
is clearly seen that the man on his own initiative had started to do something that was not in God's plan.
So who is this one being stopped? Saying somebody has already started measuring, doing his own initiative, and he was stopped. Don't measure, because it's going to be inhabited as towns without a wall. Do you understand? Hence,
his endeavor to measure the city, which is to number its inhabitants, was a mistaken idea of his own or some other, for which he was quickly corrected and definitely told to abandon his trying to measure the city. That it would be as a town having no walls, no prescribed boundary line, because for the multitude of both men and cattle, it could not therefore be measured or numbered.
Right. Since
inspiration is looking down to our time and speaking in our terms, the young man, therefore...
Our terms are young men, yeah?
The young man, therefore, represents latter-day Christian workers.
Right?
Young, not ancient.
They are not ancient. So, latter-day Christian workers, what are they? Just now, we have a lot of workers today, preaching everywhere, isn't it? These are Christian workers, isn't it? Now, young, not ancient, and who, right?
Who subjected themselves to the reign of uninspired Bible interpreters that limit the Lord.
Right.
Imagine that the living saints in the city are to be so few that a man can number them, namely 1 foot 4,000. Not considering that these are only the first fruits of the great harvest.
So it means amongst all preachers of the day, there's somewhere where a preacher is there for the 1 foot 4,000. So if the preacher for the 1 foot 4,000 is BSM TV, so what about all others? What are they for? It says there could be uninspired teachers elsewhere. Because the teachers who are supposed to be teaching the 1 foot 4,000 are found on one platform. But if there are several platforms of these young men preaching, they could be uninspired. Do you understand? So here, the angels, yeah?
The angel's explanation that Jerusalem is to be inhabited by an innumerable multitude of both men and cattle proves that this was news to the young man.
Right.
When and how, in the stream of time, is this young man to be corrected?
Right.
The only logical and fair conclusion one can come to is that when the spirit of prophecy unrolls the scroll, when God raises an interpreter of the scriptures, then it is that such a doctrinal correction can be made.
Right. So, when people were busy preaching all over about the coming of Christ, obviously, then God makes sure there is an interpreter who arises to proclaim the proper gospel. An interpreter is a prophet. God makes sure there arises a prophet to start preaching the proper interpretation. So that once you hear it, you will wonder why all over we are hearing all these uninspired, which are not uninspired. It means it's not a "thus saith the Lord." That's it. If you say anything which is not in the Bible, it's not inspired. It's an uninspired interpretation that you are saying. But God, amongst all this, everywhere, God raises a prophet to give inspired prophecy so that the people are prepared to meet God. Right? Now, so important is the living spirit of prophecy in the church. Right?
As the young man's experience proves that regardless of one's zeal, sincerity, and integrity, he cannot rightly serve God without it.
Right.
That even one's best work and intention is bound to be at cross purposes with God's.
Right.
It is therefore high time for the church to start believing all the prophets have written. Knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation.
Right.
For the prophecy came not in all time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost.
Right. So it means no matter what we try, how much zeal we read, how much work we do, sweating, as long as we do not have a living spirit of prophecy, that's all rubbish in front of God. God will only have a work which has been interpreted by the Spirit that wrote it. The Bible was written by prophets. People who were inspired by God to write the Bible. And the people who will listen to what the Bible says will listen to a prophet interpreting what is in the Bible. Why are these prophecies not in front of us? Why don't we know them? Why? Because It's the job of an interpreter or a prophet to make sure the spirit which wrote the Bible is understood by the people. Because the prophet should be inspired by that spirit which wrote the Bible, so that people will understand what the Bible wants. You can make all fanciful interpretations as long as there is no living spirit or prophets. And you say and testify in your own words that there is no more prophet. You are sure you are not interpreting it right. If you are interpreting it right, then the spirit of prophet says there is no word in the Bible which is of private interpretation. So it means you cannot interpret it without the prophet. That's all it means. You only need a prophet to interpret what the Bible has said. If you profess by your own mouth that there is no more prophet, then it means you cannot understand what is written in the Bible for you to understand, because it only needs an interpretation by a spirit of prophets, by the spirit which wrote the Bible. Right? Inspiration insists
that it is absolutely impossible for one to privately, without the spirit of truth, interpret the sealed prophecies.
It's impossible for you to do that, right?
And let us remember that no revealed truth ever came,
right,
nor ever will come,
right,
through the halls of learning. It is therefore of vital importance that you let alone the angel of the Laodiceans, lest you too be spewed out.
Right.
If he chooses to feed on his empty sermons, still teaching that the church needs no more truth, that she has enough to carry her through the pearly gates, that he can without inspiration interpret the scriptures and know what truth is, then let him himself eat his unholy feast. Tell him that you prefer to live on meat in due season, direct from the throne of God.
Right. So you see, as long as we prove there is no prophet, then it means all that we are doing is uninspired. Because if we need inspiration, then the prophet should be there. If there is no prophet, there is no inspiration in whatever we are doing or whatever we are understanding and preaching. So this is correct. In every age, from the beginning to the end, there was no way people would just understand without, even go to the first Exodus. They wouldn't understand these 5 books without Moses writing them. The very Moses who wrote them is the very Moses who explained to them. Though Moses was working with Miriam and Aaron, they were not even permitted to interpret the Bible. It was Moses' duty to make the people know what he wrote. Do you understand? So you go even further, you find even in Christ's time, without accepting Christ, they wouldn't understand what Christ was talking to them. That's why he said they have ears, they don't hear. They have eyes, they don't see. Even how mighty they would be only left in darkness. People, if you talk about darkness can be as long as people continue in darkness, it can be for eternity. Unless you wake up, you can be sleeping. Those who crucified Christ, they crucified until today. If you would ask them today, they will say Christ is not the Son of God. So error can be as long as anything, but it's you who has to wake up to the call of heaven. Yeah? And then here it says, they which lead. In Isaiah, go to Isaiah chapter 3, verse 12.
Verse 12. They which lead thee, cause thee to err,
right,
and destroy the way of thy paths.
Right. And then go to Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 14 to 15.
Verse 14. Turn all backsliding children, saith the Lord.
Right.
For I am married unto you, and I will take you, one of a city and 2 of a family, and I will bring you to Zion, and I will give you pastors according to mine heart,
right,
which shall feed you with
right,
knowledge and understanding.
Right. So you understand that all this has to be designed by God so that we understand the scriptures. We will never understand the scriptures without the living spirit of prophet. So now he's saying that person who was measuring Jerusalem was doing a wrong thing. God is saying, don't measure it, for it's going to be inhabited without walls. So it says somebody who was doing the work which God had not sent. Who is that in our day? Who is doing? We have several preachers. We have so many people preaching. But have they been sent? Have they been sent by God? Because we will know for sure in the last day there will be someone who will be sent to lead God's people. We saw the dragon making a lot of people go into this woman, to be part of the woman, to be part of, to cause the woman to be carried away. It's there in Revelation chapter 12. And we found it in 1T, page 577. It's there. But causing the woman, so that the woman rejects all the laws and all the statutes, all the feasts. But thank God, the earth opened the mouth and swallowed all the flood. And the 144,000, the remnant, were standing with Christ on Mount Zion as the people of God. God selected them to come back, where he says, I'm back to Jerusalem, so that the 144,000 will come and stand with him on Mount Zion. May God help us as we study these prophecies, so that they are not only a hearsay, but they are molding our characters, our life, so that we receive the seal and wait for the soon coming kingdom, which is just near. You can see what is happening. The world has changed. It's changed for the better. It's changing for the kingdom to be established. Let's all unitedly work so hard to prepare for the coming of Christ. In the last days, we have so many interesting events coming. You and I will enjoy in the kingdom. May God bless today.